Baby, welcome you guys. This is Backseat Bible. My name is Jada B and I am your host. You know how you have those backseat drivers that are always giving you unsolicited advice? Well, you're going to want to take mine. Why? Because it's coming straight from the Bible. Now, the way I'm going to do today's episode is a little bit different than what I've been doing, which is a lot of reactions and things like that. I really just want to chat. I mean, it is a podcast. I just want to talk about something that God kind of has been showing me over the last year, almost 2 years now, and really since I moved to where I am now. And so since January, since living where I am now, it has been amplified what he has been showing me. And what God has been showing me is that he has set my standard so high for so many things in such a magnificent way. But I want to give a disclaimer, right? The only way, and God, I knew that the Lord wanted me to say this as well. The only way God can set your standard this high is if you are obedient to his call to action. And what I mean by that is the Lord had led me to Isaiah 54, which is referencing expanding your tents and how he wants to fill that up. As you've seen by the title, I'm talking about my church. I'm talking about my friendships. I'm talking about relationships, romantic relationships to be more specific, and how God has just been showing up in all of those areas. And I'm probably going to do them in that order as well. You have to be obedient. You have to be obedient. You have to do what it is that he's asking you to do. Again, you have to prepare the space in order for him to fill the space. So with that being said, without further ado, let's jump right in. So when it comes to church specifically, again, I had to answer a call, right? I had to be willing and allow God to open that door. So God told me 2 years ago to start looking for a church. While I was looking at different places. I was praying over different places. I was checking TikTok for different places. And I finally find Vision RDU, and it is in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it is the lead pastor is Pastor Jerome Gay, but there are also other pastors. They also lead the church as well. It's not just him, but he is the lead pastor. I find their church on TikTok, and immediately I go to their YouTube. And I want to preface that for me, church was never something I wanted to do. I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't want to go to church. Once I got into my relationship with God, I'm like, what do I need to go to church for? Now, looking at like that version of me and being like, what do I need to go to church for? Those questions have been answered times a million. There are so many reasons why God calls us to community, and my expectations have been blown out the water. My standards have been raised so high. And so that being said, I see this pastor, I see his teaching, and his teaching is really good. I'm like, okay, period. Like, it doesn't feel all, because me, again, church was not my thing. It was never my thing. I was not interested in going to church, but it was very much like huffing, like not him, but what I was turned off by was like the huffing, the puffing. Obviously we know modern churches always asking for money, but in a very much trifling way. I'm just be honest, very trifling, very like shady, very sketchy. You can tell that money is not being put to good use. And so I'm doing my research. I'm checking on this church. I'm seeing the reviews. I'm looking at videos. I'm seeing video reviews. I'm seeing people talk about it and like, man, this is a really good teaching. So I finally go. I do not remember my first day there, but I do remember overall my first month or so there, just being able to tell that it was just such sound teaching. It still is. I just don't live there anymore. It's such sound teaching. He was a phenomenal teacher. And one thing that one of the pastors ended up saying about his teaching was that it felt like we were in a theology class. It felt like we were getting stuff that you wouldn't get unless you went to college, unless you went to school for this. Like some of the teachings were like as though we were becoming theologians. It was just so amazing how in-depth his teachings were and how knowledgeable he was of the scriptures. He was extremely knowledgeable of the scriptures, knowledgeable in his breaking down of the scriptures, of this understanding of the scriptures, how he explains the scriptures, how he breaks them down. Like it was just, and it is so amazing. But that's just the main thing, right? You obviously want to go to a church that has sound teaching. Of course, that is one of the main things that you're going to look for. But the thing that allowed me, or that helped me to want to continue to go there, was not just the worship either. I love the worship. The worship be bumping. Love me some good worship. Gotta have some good worship. It was the people. The way the people want to connect with you, the way they want to love on you. And they always say, we are not like a family, we are a family. And it just reminds you of how the Bible really calls us to be the body of Christ. We are a family. We are supposed to lean and love on one another and pour into one another and build each other up. We are supposed to edify the church. That is what we're supposed to do. And so being in this community that loved on you so hard, but not aggressively, like they never pushed or anything, but they were definitely attentive. active, and they gave so many opportunities to serve, to volunteer, they had so many different programs that you really could find your niche. You really could find that thing that you knew you were called to do. And everybody just loved on everybody. Like, everybody was so interconnected, and then the amount of times that we've had like just fun events there. And so before I get ahead of myself, I want to go back for a little bit and just talk about how, again, I had to be obedient. So it didn't just come to going to church. I also had to be willing to stretch myself and be uncomfortable and stay after church. You know how you go to church and be like, all right, well, I did what you told me to do, Lord. Now I'm about to get up out of here. That was me for a very, very, very long time. I would go and I'd be like, okay, I went. You told me to go, I went. But I wasn't fellowshipping, and God really wanted me to fellowship. And so I started fellowshipping, but it only happened through my roommate. She ended up being like, hey, we need to actually spend time after church. We need to start volunteer. She was like, all right, if you don't want to, I'll do it. And at the time we were sharing a car. I have that whole testimony on my page. Y'all can go look at it. But she was just basically saying, like, we need to be spending time. We need to be like, we need to be making sure that we actually build relationship and become the family that they're talking about. And so I was like, I did not want to do it. Y'all did not want to do it. She like signed us up for this financial class. And so we took that together. She was just signing us up for a lot of stuff. And I was like, girl, she signed us up for VBS, which is Vacation Bible School. That was my first time ever doing that. I was with the baby. She was the lead teacher of the 5th grade class. I was like, girl, more power to you, because I'm not ready for that responsibility. But she was just more of an outgoing person. But her encouraging me to serve and to actually be intentional about sowing my time, not just going to church on Sunday, but actually finding a group, volunteering in different opportunities, serving. They had this church walk that they would do every other Sunday, where they would go out, whoever signed up would go out after church, and they would walk around. And they would pray. They would pray over the neighborhood, and we would go up to, if we see people we want to share the gospel with them, we would evangelize essentially. If we saw anybody who was interested to know what we were doing, and this was every so often after church. And she would be like, "I'm going on a prayer walk." That's what it's called. She was like, "I'm going on the prayer walk. Are you coming?" And so I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna have to sit in the car regardless, so I might as well come," because again, we were sharing the car. So it's just all these different versions of serving and fellowshipping that God was showing me, and He was encouraging me and saying, "Hey, it can't just be going, sitting down, getting that word and leaving. You need to be sowing into community here." So that was one of the biggest things, right? And so many blessings came out of that. So many blessings came out of that. I came out of my shell. I made amazing friends that are still in my life and that I still connect with to this day, that I miss dearly because I don't live there anymore. But then that also was able to translate into this new season when I moved and God started telling me to go to church. Again, He was like, "I need you to find a church." I'm like, "Lord, I just got here." Like, at the time I had just gotten here, literally wasn't even here for a week, was not even in this new city for a week. And God was like, "You got to find a church." I had a dream. He told me to find a church. The next day, oh my gosh, y'all, there's so many layers to this. God had been calling me to volunteer. Again, serving in the world, not just a church, but in the world too, because that's how you connect. That's how you spread the gospel. We are literally called to make disciples. And so I ended up going to a meeting for this volunteer. I volunteer in hospice. So to volunteer in a hospice center, I went to a meeting to meet with the lady that was going to like get me all set up, the manager, I guess. And we don't even talk about my hospice. Like, we don't talk about anything about the volunteer job, because I'm going to say job, but it's not like I'm not being paid. We don't even talk about the job. We immediately start talking about our testimonies, the Lord, our love for the Lord. It just, the way it happened was so evidently God. And then she asked me, "Are you looking for a church?" And again, the night before I had a dream where God was like, "You need to find a church." And so again, me receiving the call and acting on that call, right? God telling me to do something, me being obedient. And now where I am now, the church that I go to now, God has blown my mind when it comes to serving in community and loving on each other and showing up for other people. Like, the way this church holds one another accountable, again, He has set my standards so high for how we are supposed to interact as the body of Christ with one another, how we're supposed to hold each other accountable, how we're supposed to check on one another, how we're supposed to uplift and support one another, how we're supposed to genuinely sharpen one another in the word, in the scriptures, how we're supposed to serve. Now, I will say He's still testing me and stretching me, because this specific church, they serve more than my other one. Like, they meet often, but the Bible does tell us to meet often. And so that's been something that God has definitely been testing me in. But I was saying in a recent TikTok, I was like, man, I have never felt this amount of unconditional love and support in a church community. Like in my life, not just specifically this church, but the last 2 churches that God has had me at that have just loved on me tremendously and have gone out of their way to make sure I was good. And it just shows that this is really the heart of God and the importance of community. We are not called to walk this walk alone. We are not supposed to walk this walk alone. We are not supposed to be isolated. Jesus wasn't isolated. He would go by himself to pray, but he would come right back to his disciples. He would come right back to his family. He would come right back to his followers. We have time, obviously, that we need to reset and be by ourselves. But when it comes to the entirety of this walk, it can't just be yourself. It can't just be you and your immediate family, whether that be your mom, your sister, your dad. It can't just be that. It can't just be your husband. It can't just be your wife. It can't just be your kids. You have to have community within the body of Christ where you are actively out and serving with them on a regular basis, because that is how we expand. That is also how we go out and make disciples. You cannot serve God just by yourself in your home. You got to get out. And so, yeah, that's how he raised my standards when it comes to churches, y'all. So just had to say that. All right, now I'm gonna dive straight into how God has absolutely raised my standards when it comes to friendship. As I mentioned, there is a video on my channel where I shared that God had a stranger move into my house. Whew. And y'all can watch that. I'm not going to go into super detail, but essentially a girl, that I went to high school with, she moves into my home due to God's leading. And God did end up, at first he didn't tell me first, and it threw me all the way off. I'm like, you ain't tell me. What do you mean by that? So what we doing? But eventually, though, she comes down for like a quick little visit. We end up doing a test run, and the test run was terrible. We just did not vibe at all. But then we watched a sermon that Sunday, and God confirmed what he wanted us to do. Again, me being obedient to that call. So I got my own spot. I have plenty of space at that point in time. I'm like, all right, cool. You can come and move in with me. I'm trying to be obedient to what the Lord is telling me to do, telling us to do, because he was telling both of us to do it, right? She moves into my house, and we are just not clicking at all. And if anything, it's me. Like, I was just so standoffish. I was not showing the heart of God. I was not showing the heart of Christ. I just wasn't being kind. I just really, really wasn't. And I remember recently having this revelation that in the midst of how I was treating her, I'm just being so real, I was not treating her the best. I wasn't being awful, but we would have a lot of disagreements, and I was very firm, and I had a slick mouth, and I would say certain things. I just was not showing the heart of God. Like, I was just kind of like, you have to be here, so we just got to get through this. But I just wasn't being patient enough. I wasn't being gracious enough, and we'll get to that. So anyway, I recently have this revelation when I think I'm praying, but I think I also talked to her earlier in the day, something like that, where I'm like, oh my gosh, you showed me the love of Christ that entire time. And not just like, oh, you showed me love. You literally showed me unconditional love the entire time. And what I mean by that is, when I was a terrible person to her, before I even became her friend, when I was a terrible just person to her in general, I would get so worried that she would leave, and I wouldn't tell her this until after the fact. I wouldn't tell her this, but I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I was terrible to her. She's going to leave. I would get fearful that she would leave, because I knew that this was also what God wanted us to do. So I'm like, I'm going to ruin what God's trying to do, but if she's, but she bothers me or this is annoying or whatever. So I was like struggling, but I also knew, I'm like, well, God told me to do this. I want to steward over it. I want to do it right. And so I would struggle internally and have these moments of just irritation and frustration. And I would just be like, man, she's so annoying. But then in the same breath, I'd be like, but I don't want her to go. She's going to go, because I was nasty. I was not kind at all to her. And I'm like, she's going to end up leaving. So I will wait the next morning for her bags to be packed. Every single time we got into it, I'd be like, okay, her bag, this is the morning she's going to leave. And when I finally tell her that during the time, I'm like, if I'm being so real, like, we got to a moment we were just having a heart to heart. And I was like, if I'm being so real, I'm waiting on you to just pack your bags and go. And she was like, why would I do that? And I was kind of dumbfounded by her saying that. And I was like, well, because, I'm not she was like, I would only ever leave if God told me to leave. She was like, if he wants me here, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to love on you, and I'm going to endure, and we're going to figure this out. We're going to work it out together. I'm not going anywhere. And I broke down in tears, y'all. I was just dumbfounded. I was just so blown away by her truly unconditionally loving me like Christ. When we think about and this is going to sound dramatic when being honest, when the Lord, in the Bible, when it says to never leave us nor forsake us, she was the embodiment of that in such a profound, beautiful, patient, gracious, understanding way. And it blessed me tremendously. And it showed me that, if you're like this and we're not even friends yet, imagine the unconditional love I'll be able to receive once we really become friends. And we became like sisters. We became sisters. And now that is my girl. I love her now. I love her with my whole entire heart. No matter what happens, she literally is like, I'm not going anywhere. And it blesses me so much. It blesses me so much because, again, if she was so willing and ready to receive me at my worst, I just couldn't imagine what it was like at my best. And so anyway, again, God opened that door to me answering that call. And so now our friendship has turned into a lot, right? So we got really, really close while she was living with me. After all the trials and turmoil, we have our heart to hearts. We started learning how to communicate better. She started to learn my language of how to communicate, period. I didn't know how to communicate properly at all. I was not emotionally intelligent. And I can say that and be real about it. I wasn't super emotionally intelligent. I barely knew how to have uncomfortable conversations whenever we would, because we would still get into it sometimes, because you living up under each other, you sharing a car, you know what I'm saying? So we would still get into it sometimes. And also, she was teaching me so much patience and grace, how to have uncomfortable conversations, how to be patient, how to be understanding, how to make sure the person feels heard. One thing she'll always do because again, we are not perfect, we're still going to get into it. So whenever we do get into a disagreement or a misunderstanding or whatever, when we're talking, she always asks me, do you feel heard? And that fills my cup up tremendously. And now I am in the practice of asking her that. Do you feel heard? Whenever we're getting into these conversations, do you feel heard afterwards? And it just fills me up so much because I just recognize how much I needed that, how much I needed to know that you see me, you hear me, you understand me, you see my perspective. Even if you don't agree with how I did something, even if I hurt you, you'll always ask me for my perspective to see my intentionality behind the hurt. Where is my heart? She'll always say, do you know my heart? I want to make sure you know my heart towards you. And I think for me, that plays such a huge role, because how can you ensure that you guys are loving on each other properly if you don't know the intent behind the action? So you ask these questions. And you're like, okay, well, I want to make sure you know my intention though. So let's talk about that. And then once I give her my perspective and once she gives me her perspective, it's always an understanding. It's always a, do you feel heard? Do you feel heard? And then we make sure that we meet each other in the middle and that there's understanding on both sides, so that we can deepen our friendship and our connection and continue to grow in that. And it's such a beautiful thing. So we got really, really close, living with me in Raleigh. And then she has to go to Italy. She ends up going to Italy. She moves out, and she lived with me for a year. I think a year almost to the day. And she lives with me for a year, and she goes to Italy. And I'm like, okay, I got to get to this routine. We were so used to talking to each other every single day, though, that once she moved to Italy, a completely different time zone. She was there for, I think, 3-4 months. Once she's in a completely different time zone, ensuring that the other one knew that even when we go without talking, even if because her lifestyle is super busy. I am more chill. My lifestyle is not as busy. Even to this day, she's back in the States now. Her life is so busy, but there's so much grace and understanding because I know that she has a lot going on. And so I just, she always wanted to reaffirm me, because I would start to feel insecure. She will always want to reaffirm me and be like, hey, even though I'm busy, that doesn't mean I don't want you blowing up my phone. That doesn't mean I don't want, I don't want to hear from you. She was like, even if I don't get back to you, because I would feel some type of way if I'm blowing up her phone and I don't hear back. And then I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm such a burden, I'll get in my head. And she will always reaffirm me and be like, no, you're good. We're good. And so even though we would have those bouts of silence, because we would go 2 weeks without talking. We will talk once a week, once every 2 weeks or whatever. That, because of our communication, once we finally did talk, it was we would pick up as if nothing happened, as if no time had passed. And that blessed me because it showed me that we can have this deep friendship even when we're not super close all the time. I think it shows, not that we should have these bouts of silence with God, but I think the way she shows up and the way I try my best to show up is also, it's reflective to me of how that relationship with God, right? And how we should be in the body in general, is that you both should be willing in order to deepen. And so that being said though, obviously it's not a perfect relationship, but what makes it perfect is how we show up for each other. Even when there's bouts of silence, she shows up in a reaffirming loving way by letting me know, like, hey, even though this is going on, my love has not changed. Do you know my heart? Again, reminding me of, do I know her heart? Do I know her intent? Right? And knowing that if I know your heart, then I know we can deepen this. I know that we can continue to thrive in this. And so it's the idea of just both of us showing up, both of us being intentional, even when we're not spending every single day together like we used to. Because boy, did we do that. We had a time. I seen a video on Instagram recently where it's just like, it says something along the lines of like, you have a friend that raises the standard so high that it affects how you have other connections and relationships and friendships and things like that. And it's so true. It is so true. She has set the standard so high just on how she shows up. She's the most intentional person I've ever met. Yeah, holidays, like you can't see over there, but I have she sent me a care package for Valentine's Day because we don't live together anymore. And it just blessed me so much because I'm like, dang, I didn't get you none, girl. It's not even I didn't get her none, but I just didn't think about it. And like, she'll think about things that I won't even think about. And so now I do my best to implement them into other areas and relationships in my life with my mom, my sister, my family, other friends, things like that. I try to implement those communication skills that she's taught me. Simply just, hey, do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? Holding myself accountable. I'm so sorry for this, that, and the third. And I will say sometimes it hurts when that's not when that's not reciprocated on their end. They don't ask me if I feel heard. Sometimes it does hurt, but I also have to remember that I was that for her. I didn't ask her those questions originally, and that eventually God had to prune those things within me in order for me to know, oh, this is how we have a healthy friendship. That foundation was set when she let me know that I'm going to show up for you no matter what. And it's not like she was saying, because I'm going to love you like Jesus loves the church. She never said that. Those words never came out of her mouth, which is how I knew it was God just genuinely working through her. It has blessed me tremendously. And I pray that I can bless others the way God has blessed me through her. Truly, I pray that. So that is how he set my standard with that. And again, the only way we were even able to cultivate a friendship like this was literally via me responding to the call. Her saying, hey, I feel like God telling me to move in with you, and me being like, okay, let's do it. And it being rocky at first, but God had brought so much fruit. I literally have no words to express how grateful I am. I have no words. So anyway, moving on to now the last part, which is relationships. God has truly set that standard, and the only way he was able to do that was once I truly surrendered that part of my life to him, which was romantic, right? Releasing my ideas of what I should look for in a partner, in a husband. The way God was able to do that was wiping the slate completely clean. I had so many ideas about what I believed. They weren't fully according to scripture. And once I was able to kind of cut that completely just to its like uproot it, lay it at God's feet and ask him, hey, Lord, what do you say about this area of my life? What do you think about this area of my life? That was when he began to lead me naturally in scripture. I would come across scriptures. I would come across random sermons. I came across a sermon about the Song of Solomon and about courtship and marriage. He also used Kat as well. That's the name of my best friend. I love her so much. That is her. So he, about courtship and relationships through her as well. She was in a relationship recently, and she was just, her standards were set, and through her we were able to have very open, candid conversations about what to expect in a husband and what not to stand for either, right? What not to allow as we're navigating Christian dating, if you will. And so the Lord ended up using sermons, used her, he used a podcast of this beautiful, loving, amazing, beautiful man and woman of God they're young, they're newlyweds. I'm saying they're young. I'm pretty sure the dude is my age, but they look young to me. And their testimony of how they courted one another, how intentional he was, and then also now the connections I have at these churches, right? What I've learned through my mentors, I have mentors now, and what she has been teaching me, what she's been showing me through her and her husband, and the way that they work together according to the scriptures they have businesses. My camera lost storage. Anyways, as I was saying, the connections that he's allowed me to have at church and being able to see the examples of courtship, but also of marriage after courtship has raised my standards tremendously, and what I expect in a man of God, what I expect in how the courtship should go. And like I mentioned also, like I said, the podcast he led me to, the sermons he's led me to, the friendships that I've had, and more so me seeing it in real life, in person, what it means to have a godly husband, what it means to have two people who are equally yoked, what it means to have someone that is constantly just sharpening you and leading you properly and loving on you properly as though you are God's child. Whether you're the husband or the wife, whether you are the woman fiance or the male fiance, whichever you are honoring them as a child of God first and as a possible husband or wife after. And so God was so intentional with just, again, I had to respond to the call by completely eradicating everything I ever thought I knew or understood about relationships, about courtship, about dating, about marriage, about what to look for, everything. He had to uproot it all. And again, it's funny, I don't mean to keep mentioning it, but literally hanging out with Kat as well, her showing up for me in a way where she would say to me, this is bare minimum, and I would be thinking like, this is amazing. She'd be like, girl, this is bare minimum, first of all. Secondly, people should do this all the time. Thirdly, she was like, and if I'm doing this, you should be expecting your husband to do this and more. And I was like, girl, you're right. And so it's little things like that where I'm like, oh my gosh, like this has opened up a whole new world of intentionality, showing up for people, loving on one another, no matter what, and what that actually looks like being lived out when you have the unconditional love of Christ and being able to show that in friendships, relationships, whatever. But again, in order for God to set that standard for you, you have to, one, release everything you thought you knew and everything, how you handled everything. But secondly, most importantly, which it should be number one actually, is responding to his call. If he's asking you to go to that church, if he's asking you to serve in that community, if he's asking you, you have no idea what God is capable of until you respond, until you expand your tents, until you widen your, what does it say? I want to be on scripture. And so you enlarge your tents, you stretch your curtains wide, you don't hold back, you lengthen your cords, you strengthen your stakes. Until you do that, you will never know how grand, how amazing. Because when you continue to read Isaiah 54, you see, one, the call to action. Two, you see encouragement. In verse 4, it says, do not be afraid, you will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace, you will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth. And so he's already reassuring you, being like, hey, listen, when you go to that church, when you become friends with that person, when you start intentionally dating according to my word, when you do these things as I've called you to do, you won't be embarrassed. You won't be humiliated. You won't be put to shame. I will honor you because you obeyed me first, because you listened to what I'm asking of you. And then he goes on, verse 5, it says, for your maker is your husband, the Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. He's reminding the people of who's responsible for making this happen, who's going to be responsible for the one, again, filling your tent, filling up your space that you're enlarging. You got to respond to that call to action. He reaffirms you, and then he lets you know, hey, this is me talking to you. This is me letting you know what I'm capable of, what it is that I want to do in your life. I jump down to verse 11, and he begins to say, I will rebuild you with stones of turquoise, your foundations with lapis lazuli. I will make your battlements of rubies, your gates of sparkling jewels, and all your walls of precious stones. It's showing the beauty of the choice to be obedient, right? That beauty of that choice of being like, all right, Lord, I'm going to give this thing to you. I'm going to completely surrender this to you. It's uncomfortable. I don't know why I'm doing it. Again, I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to invite her into my home. I didn't want to release my idea of what I should think, what I thought I should be looking for in a man, when God blew that completely out of the water, blew that completely out of all these things. He blew completely out of the water. And all I've ever wanted to do now that I have that is show other people what God has shown me, so I can be an example for others who may not have an example. And so continuing on, lastly in verse 14b, so you have nothing to fear, terror will be far removed, it will not come near you. If anyone does attack you, it will not be my doing. Whoever attacks you will surrender to you. So firstly, he was letting them know that they will be safe, right? There's safety and reassurance in obedience. So he, again, reassuring you again that there's safety in this choice. And then he goes on to say, if anyone does attack you, it will not be my doing. What I took from that is, if it does not look like me, if that church doesn't look like me, if that friendship doesn't look like me, if that relationship doesn't look like me, it is not of my doing. It is not of my doing. That's not me. Let me show you what I'm capable of. Let me show you what I can do. You have to respond to that call. And if these things do happen, that's not me. I've already shown you, again, I've set the standard. I've already shown you what it is that I can do in all these areas of your life. And if you don't see that reflected in those connections, in that church, in that relationship, in that friendship, if you don't see that reflected, then you know that that's not me. Then he goes on to say, whoever attacks you will surrender to you. Obviously, we know that that's talking about a victory in the situation, of course. But I think for me, that thought of surrendering is I'm praying that me showing up in that way, even if it's not God in that circumstance, if I continue to show up the way God has led me to show up, that the situation will surrender eventually. Whether that looks like them learning from this and being able to take what it is that I've done my best to pour into them, into other areas of their life, or if that just simply looks like, now they can do it within our connection. Whether they can show up for me or if they can show up for others, I don't care. As long as it's surrendered in the sense of God has set the standard. I have now acted within that standard. And now I live by that standard. And now I also reflect that standard. And I pray that whoever's on the other side of it can surrender to it in the sense of recognizing that it is God's action, his doing, his heart, his intentionality, and the blessings of what it is he's capable of in those circumstances. And all I can do again is pray that I can show up as best as possible to be a good example of those things. Because I had an amazing example set before me. And I'm so grateful. So yeah, that is pretty much today's video. That's all I had to say. Just, again, God has set the precedent. My standards are unreasonably high. If I didn't say that at the beginning of the video, I'm being facetious, obviously. They are not unreasonable. These are extremely reasonable because once God showed me what is actually attainable in all of these areas of my life, I have no reason to want less than. I have zero reason to ever or even allow myself to have less than. I have no reason to, because God, you set my standards as high. Sorry, Lord, you did it. No, but I mean that in the best way possible. Like, you have set my standard this high. I'm going to, again, do my best to show up in that way. But at the end of the day, I pray I can be an example that they can receive from it, period. Because it is such a beautiful example. God has set the standards so high. He's done an amazing job, and it's not unreasonable. It is so reasonable to desire and want the things that God wants for you. It is absolutely fruitful when you are, again, you got to answer that call. You got to be obedient. You got to do what it is he's asking of you. But looking at the fruit of what that obedience can bring forth, and him being able to enlarge your territories, him being able to enlarge your tent, him being able to set your standards super high, because he can do it. And he's amazing. So, okay. I think that's all I'm going to say. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.